Good morning, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining us today for the Texas Mortgage Banker Association's 26 through 27 educational webinar series. We're so glad to have you. This series is a part of the Education and Endowment Committee, led this year by me, Jennifer Baker, and my co-chair, Elizabeth Miller, who happens to also be our presenter for the day. Today's topic is mastering open-ended questions. This webinar is going to last about an hour, and we encourage you to participate throughout the webinar using the chat window. So go ahead and pop that open. If you don't have it open yet, that'll be the best way to communicate. And without further ado, I will turn it over to today's speaker, Elizabeth Miller, who is the AVP of National Training at DHI Mortgage. Good morning, Elizabeth.
Good morning, Jen. Thank you so much. I am going to get my screen shared. It is my honor to join you all in sharpening your saws this morning and working on your soft skills in communication. And it's one of my things that, we call them soft skills, but really any soft skill can be a hard skill, can be something that you become an expert on, and there's always room for improvement. So I appreciate you joining today and focusing on your professional development. We've got a great group today, and I'm going to reiterate what Jen said. Please participate through the chat. I welcome your questions, comments, stories, and let's go ahead and share. As Jen explained, our topic is mastering open-ended questions, and it's all about effective communication to help you build relationships, whether it's a borrower, customer, internal or external partners, your colleagues, even in your personal relationships. So open-ended questioning is one of those things you don't often think about. So just a quick welcome question. I want you to get thinking about this topic and participate in the chat window. Let's ask, and I'll put these in here. On a scale of 1 to 10, do you think that you use open-ended questions often? 10 being, I use them all the time. This is a really strong point of how I communicate, or I probably don't use them as often as I should, being a 1. So 1 to 10, how would you rate yourself in asking open-ended questions? Ooh, Kim. Kim gave herself a 9. You're going to have to share with us how you've gotten strong. Same with Krista. Those of you who have this as a skill, definitely pass on some of your expertise. Appreciate it. And those of you who were rating yourself maybe a lower number, just know that you're going to come away after this hour with a higher number. So let me ask those of you who are strong at open-ended questioning, what is one question you ask your business partners regularly? What's an open-ended question that helps the conversation get going as well as build your relationship? Share in the chat window a question you always ask. That's a great one, Kim. Tell me about your current priorities. I can often spot our experienced high-performing salespeople because they have had to either be trained on open-ended questioning or learn the hard way and just get good at it over time. But our sales folks, it's crucial when you're in sales to ask open-ended questions. Candy shares something personal to connect, for sure. An example of a personal question that is more open-ended might be, tell me about yourself, or tell me about your family. So we're going to talk about some of those. So now that you have kind of an idea where we're going, let's talk about our objectives. Hopefully what your takeaways are after you've invested this kind of lunch and learn time frame with me. By the end of this session, you should be able to, number one, distinguish between open and closed-ended questions. Believe it or not, it's not always easy to discern a closed-ended question versus an open-ended question. So we're going to make sure we define that and you get better at identifying them. Second, there are some techniques, and there is the TED technique and the 5W1H technique, and we're going to go over both of those on how to improve your skill sets in changing the percentage. You know, closed-ended questions are useful, right? But so sometimes you have to ask a closed-ended question, right? Like, will you be putting money down? Right? That's a closed-ended question. Answer is yes or no. But we want the percentage of questions you ask to be more like 20% closed-ended and 80% open-ended. So more of the time asking open-ended questions and having more options of open-ended questions in your tool belt going forward. So these techniques will help you. You're going to practice formulating open-ended questions for some specific scenarios, and you're going to walk away improving your conversation skills with borrowers, colleagues, business associates, as I shared before. So these are your objectives. Is there anything that you hoped to gain from this session that I did not cover in the objectives? Anyone join this call because, hey, I really needed help with X, Y, and Z? If you do have something that you wanted to cover and get better at, please put it in the chat window if you don't see it in the objectives here. Okay, so why do open-ended questions matter? Let's use a scenario that we all might relate to. Imagine that you just walked into a restaurant. You're sitting down at your table with some colleagues. The waiter walks up, and this is probably more of a business meal and maybe a higher end restaurant. And the waiter walks up and says, "Would you all like to start with water?" That's an example of a closed-ended question. How does that make you feel? Would you all like to start with water? Like that's the only option, right? Like, okay, this question is only about the water, no other choice, right? Yeah, and Lamar, that's a great point. It wouldn't bother you. It doesn't, it's not that the closed-ended questions are bad. It's not that it should bother you, but it conveys something more than the words. Michelle says it's not really a question in that scenario, so seemed pointless to ask, right? Would you like water? Would you like to start with water? It jumps right to that feeling of this is about the waiter's checklist. The waiter wants to start with water, would like to go ahead and get the water, and only wants you to answer that question because it's on their terms, their timeline, what they want to do first. And so by asking that closed-ended question, it's not that the question itself is bad because, yeah, you probably do want to get some waters on the table, right? But it's the fact that it's a closed-ended question puts boundaries on it. So it does not allow for additional conversation, and it does not build the relationship. It does not create connections with that waiter, and that waiter is likely to have lower tips than if a waiter started with, "How's everyone doing this evening?" right? And had a little bit of conversation first. So starting with the closed-ended question, think of closed-ended question closes the conversation. And if the answer is yes or no, just know that it's not about the other person. It's not about these table of people who are here to enjoy a meal. It's about the waiter. This closed-ended question is about them and not you. So you feel like, well, oh, okay, it's time to answer that question for them. So if you're trying to be other oriented and focused on the people or the person you're communicating with, a closed-ended question tends to make it about you and not about them. So what I often feel in that situation is, yes, we want water, but don't walk away after I answer that question because we're already ready to order our cocktails. But I feel like I'm rushed, or I like you would just want a yes or no to the water, and then you're immediately going to walk away. But it's not about what I want as the customer, it's about what you want as the waiter. So just wanted to use that as an example of how closed-ended questions communicate more than just the words. And that this training isn't about saying that closed-ended questions are bad, but there is a time and a place for closed-ended questions, and they tend to be more at the end of the conversation. If hey, how's everyone doing this evening? And then someone says, well, first of all, let's start with a round of waters for the table. We want a little bit of time with the menu. Well, they got the answer to their question, but now they've built a relationship. It's open-ended, and you made the customer the priority and not your checklist the priority. So this is why the skill set of starting with open-ended questions and making that more of your habit matters, because it impacts how other people feel when they're communicating with you. Okay. We're still on the topic of why open-ended questions matter, but let's just recap what you should know by now. There are closed-ended questions and there are open-ended questions. Here's a definition. A closed-ended question is a question that limits responses to yes or no, or brief facts, or one or two word answers. So they're not just yes, no questions. It's any type of question where the answer is going to be super short. An open-ended question is one that invites explanation or a story or added context, and makes it about the other person and not yourself. So an example here, are you applying jointly? Let's say you're in loan origination and you're just asking the question, are you applying jointly? The only answer to that question is a yes or a no. An open-ended version of that question might be, what can you share about your household? And then you could follow up with, how are they involved on this loan? Right? Those open-ended, and it allows the other person to share the full story. Some of the impact of this is that if you just get a yes or no, you may not get the full story. And this is where you end up with an application that doesn't really reflect the full borrower story. Whereas you might get a response of, I'm married with 3 children and my mother lives with us, with that more open-ended question. So you're going to get more of a story, more of a broader picture of the situation. And then you can ask follow-up questions from there. And then if you still have some closed-ended questions at the end to kind of sweep up the last remaining facts you need, save your closed-ended questions for the end. Any questions on what we've covered so far? Our objectives, why open-ended questions matter, and our definitions between closed-ended and open-ended. Any questions, comments? Okay, I've got one question for you because I want to get you guys involved in the chat window. Think of a time when you asked a closed-ended question and you didn't get the full story. And maybe it was a situation where you found out more later and you're like, oh, I thought I asked that. You think of a time that has happened. But while you're thinking, I can give some examples of anyone who is a very direct or specific communicator can struggle. So I'm a very specific and literal communicator. So if I get asked the question, something like, do you want to eat out? Do you want to eat out tonight? To me, the only possible answer to that is yes or no. Not, hey, what do you have in mind for dinner tonight? Do you want to eat out for dinner tonight? I would say yes or no. And so my answer to that would be no. Well, then gets to evening time and it's like, so what are we cooking? And I'm like, oh, I don't want to cook. Well, you said you didn't want to eat out earlier. Well, yeah, that's true. I don't want to eat out, but I was thinking we should order in. Oh, well, if I'd known that, I would have already ordered it. It would be here by now. Well, you didn't ask me that. All you asked was, do I want to eat out? So being a very specific and literal communicator, I answer no, but a more open-ended question would have got a fuller answer from me. Kenneth shared, asked about how a client wants to receive a specific report without asking its purpose, their intention with the information, so we could provide a better product. Yeah, like how would you like to receive the report is very narrow. It's, yes or no, versus how are you going to use the report? How are you going to use the information? What do you want in the report? Yeah, asking much more broad questions. How they would like to receive a report. It's like, oh, send it via email. It doesn't really get you the full picture, right? Great example. I've done this training for an IT department. And it was very apparent in that training how important it was for IT professionals to ask open-ended questions, because if you're not in the IT department, you don't even know what questions you should be asking them. We don't always speak the same language. If I'm not really technical, I may not share with my IT partner everything they need to know to help me or troubleshoot my problem. I don't even know enough. I don't have the expertise to explain it. So if the IT professional is just asking things like, what time did you get that error message? Have you been getting this error message before? They may not get the full picture because they're just asking closed-ended questions, and I'm only answering those questions. It's like, oh, well, if you had asked, I could maybe share broader, and you'll have a better understanding how to help. But they definitely matter, and we're going to try and get from, like I said, asking a lot of closed-ended questions to spending more time with open-ended questions. So let's get into identifying needs. So if you are talking with someone in a business scenario, you are often trying to identify their needs or identify the group's needs. It really doesn't matter what your role is, whether you're in sales, whether you're in operations, whether you're in a corporate department or in a branch or in training like me. Oftentimes, if you're in a meeting of any sort, you're identifying needs. And a closed-ended question An example of this, and I used just some mortgage type examples. Will the subject property be your primary? It encourages yes, no, with no other context added. An open-ended question might be, what's your future vision for this property? It reveals intent and need. So asking someone about their situation. So from a training context, just to give you another example here, if I'm trying to identify needs, a closed-ended question might be, what topic do you want this training to cover? Okay, I want this training to cover open-ended questions. That's just a very short answer. Versus, what's your vision for this training? What do you hope for your teams to get out of this? What skills do you want them to be able to walk away with from this training? Much more open-ended question, and you're going to identify needs in a better way. So if you ask open-ended questions when you're trying to identify needs, you're going to result in an accurate application if you're in origination. It also eliminates additional conditions. It speeds up approvals. And this is just one context, but can you think of any other context where an open-ended question would result in identifying needs? I gave some training examples, an IT example. This is an origination example. Ken shared an example in the chat. Any other examples? Well, hopefully you're thinking of some examples in your role, in your organization, how an open-ended question would be more effective. Closed-ended questions are great for checking facts. Shawnee's shares, open-ended questions would be beneficial when conducting interviews. 100%, that's a great example. Identifying needs, motives, intentions, understanding someone's skill sets when you're interviewing them. That would be great. Kim shared, is there anything additional you want to ask that we haven't already covered? Yeah, I call that kind of that sweep up open-ended question where you're letting the other person drive the conversation. And I think this is probably that opens up a little side conversation, Kim, is that if you are focused on the other person or the other people who you're conversing with, it oftentimes feels like you're losing control. And if you're someone who likes to be in control of the conversation and make sure all the boxes are checked and you get all the facts you need, you might tend to go with more closed-ended questions, which is great to check facts, and it gives you more control, but it's not as effective. So asking open-ended questions puts the control in the other person's hands. So you do have to be willing to be a little vulnerable, hand over some of the control to the other people in the room, and let them drive the conversation a little bit more. But it results in stronger relational bonds as well. They will trust you more because you allowed them to drive the conversation. And if you say, is there anything additional you want to talk about that we haven't already covered? That is the ultimate giving the control to the other person so that they can drive the conversation. But you will find that you learn more about the other person, their needs, the situation, whatever the context is. So here's another example. Let's say you want to uncover objections or support someone better. Let's say you're in a support role and you want to find out what their pain points are. This is also a great skill set to have. So again, I used origination examples here. So a closed-ended question, are you ready to lock your loan? You may miss underlying issues if you use a closed-ended question here. However, if you say, what are your goals for locking your rate? That explores the borrower's goals, their concerns, their fears. Anything that might be an objection of theirs or a pain point, it gets at all of that, whereas a closed-ended question would not. So again, clarify goals of the other person and any of their objections. It also results in building stronger trust. Okay. Bear with me. We've got one more example here before we get into some practice. Internal communication. So this is with your coworkers. If you even want to think about it, family members, internal communication. Closed-ended question, is this file on track? It encourages shallow feedback. Yep, we're good to go. We're on track. First of all, what does on track actually mean? It's not as specific as it needs to be, but closed-ended doesn't really give the big picture. An open-ended question might be, summarize your progress and any hurdles you expect. Provides deeper insights. So again, if you're in leadership and you're wanting to increase the effectiveness of your one-on-ones, ask open-ended questions in your one-on-ones with your teammates. You'll find out more about what's going on with them than a list of closed-ended questions. And again, you're going to reveal any challenges early, improve your team alignment, reduces fire drills of, oh my gosh, well, why didn't you do that? Well, you didn't ask. You didn't specify. We didn't get to that. Well, I thought we both understood, but again, a list of closed-ended questions doesn't always get there. So at the end of the day, open-ended questions are your diagnostic tools, and they help you uncover root causes and build trust, and not just with customers or borrowers, but with all of your partners. Okay, we're actually not going to do Zoom breakout rooms because we have about 33 people here and wanted to just get you guys practicing. I'm going to put in the chat some closed-ended questions. And then I want you to think of what is a version of that question, actually draft it, put it in the chat, an open-ended version of that question. And I figured we have kind of a small group, so we can just do this together versus breakout rooms. Let's see. I have a whole list, and I'm going to just pick one at a time here. Okay, and the chat. Here's a question. Is this process manual right now? It's more of like an internal type question. Is this process manual right now? That is a yes, no, closed-ended question. What would be a different question we could ask to make that open-ended? This is where I'm testing your knowledge. Great job. Shawnice, tell me more about what this process entails. Can you tell me more about the process? Could you describe the current process? I like that. Can you explain the steps in this process that are manually completed? What type of manual process do you have or plan to implement? Ashley, that is kind of a mix. I would probably adjust that a little bit. Instead of what type of manual process do you have, that's basically assuming that it's a manual process. I would say, what type of process do you have? Just take the manual out of it. But those are all great. Great job, everyone. I love the tell me more. Several of you use the tell me more. Could you describe? Can you explain? And you'll start to see that there's tell me about, Tell me more. There's certain phrases that can lead you into an open-ended question. And all you need is like 3 or 4 of those on a sticky note, and put that on your desk or on your laptop, and it will remind you to go with open-ended questions more than the closed. Okay, let's do another one. Put this in. Did the team meet the deadline? That's a very closed-ended question because the only answer is yes or no. Draft an open-ended version that you would use instead. Ken shared, can you describe the team's progress and timing for completing the work? Candy shares, can you let me know who on the team completed the deadline? Candy, because you're just going to be getting a list of names, that's a little bit more closed-ended. Can you let me know who on the team completed the deadline? More open-ended would be, how's the team doing with the deadline? It broadens. Can you let me know who is very, all she wants are the names. It doesn't allow the other person to feel like they can expand upon that or add more context. Lakeisha, what is the time frame for completion? Yeah, if you're wanting to kind of get status. However, what is the time frame is a little bit narrow. So I would probably use more of a how's the team coming along with the deadline? A little bit more open there. How is the team doing with the deadline? A great one, Ebony. What happened with the team's deadline? Yeah, what happened? I like that. You guys are getting more creative. Great job. Debbie, what was the progress on this work? Excellent. Brandy, how is the team's progress, or how's the team's progress going regarding the project? And are we on track with the deadline? Now, you started off open, but then you ended with closed. So I would just stick with that first part. How's the team progress going regarding the project? Let the other person talk. And then if there's any remaining closed-ended question facts that they didn't provide, then ask them afterwards. Shanice, this is a tricky question to me. Would we want to use a closed-ended question when the time has already passed? It depends on what your goal is. If you're wanting to have an understanding about what's going on with the deadline, it depends. It really depends. I think if you're really close with the team, you're probably going to already know. But let's say you're a leader 2 steps up and it's something that was supposed to have been finished by Friday and you're checking in on Monday, you might be just asking, like, how'd everything go? Let's do another one. I have a lot of IT examples from when I did this for an IT group. Let me put one in here. This is on a similar line to what we just talked about. How much time do you need to complete this? You're asking someone to estimate a timeline, but that is a very closed-ended question. How much time do you need to complete this? You're basically saying, all I want in return from you is 5 business days or 3 business days or 2 hours, or you're wanting a short answer. So what would be an open-ended version of that? Sydney shares, what time frame can be expected for this to be completed? That's still closed-ended. It's what time frame is still just saying what time frame. So you did rephrase it, but it's still closed-ended. Kim shares, can you give me an idea of the time needed to complete this project? Now, you softened it a little bit with, can you give me an idea? But Kim, yours is still closed-ended because it's basically, give me the time needed. Brandy shared, what are your expectations for completion? That's a little bit more open, but still focused on the timeline. Jen says, can you explain the completion timeline for the project? That is a little bit more open-ended. I do like that a little bit more because it's, can you explain? But again, it's still, give me the timeline. Shani says, what steps and time allotment are needed to complete the task? You've added time allotment and then added steps, but still very specific about, we're all trying to control what the other person's about to say. Think of what can I ask that allows the other person to control what they're going to say? Steve shares, can you walk me through what it will take to complete this and what your timelines look like? We're getting there. Can you tell me what efforts are needed? And how long? So it's added more to what the other person can say, but we're still specifying, tell me your efforts and how long. And I know I use this one a lot. Like even, what's your vision for this project? Jen says, what does successfully complete look like to you? I love that one. What does project completion look like to you is a great open-ended one. Or what does success look like on this project to you? What's your vision for completion? What's your plan for this project? What's your plan is another one. What are your goals for this project? And know that goals will include timelines and deadlines and how long it takes. But asking, what are your goals for this project? You allow the other person to control how they answer, and hopefully they respond with timeline type answers, but then they might add some additional things that you didn't even think to ask. Ebony, what will the process look like for this project? Yes, much more open-ended. But you can see it's harder than it seems, guys, to practice switching to a truly open-ended question. And also, here's another thing, how it looks. If you're a leader and you struggle with delegating and you struggle with micromanaging, you will tend to use more closed-ended questions. As you get better and stronger at delegating and you allow your team to drive their own success and their win is your win, you will tend to start asking more open-ended questions because you're wanting to hear their ideas. You're wanting to have them show you that they have a handle on, here are the key elements, the key variables in this project that I should be reporting to you. You want them to know that they should be telling you timeline. You want them to know that they should be setting a deadline and telling you that it's probably going to take 3 business days to get this done. You don't need to be telling them and leading them and controlling what they say because you can ask more open-ended questions and trust that they will fill the blanks in themselves. Now, you can always follow up with a closed-ended question afterwards. Like, hey, I noticed after all of that, you did not specify timeline. Can you make sure that you include that in the future? That's a crucial element that you didn't include. So you know what you want them to say, but you're trusting them to share it, and then you're asking the closed-ended question later. Okay, how about we do one more? Because I feel like we're still working on this skill set. I'm actually revising this one here. Um, okay. Is everything on track to close this loan? You're going to get a yes or no answer. What would be an open-ended version? Let's say you're an ops manager and you're talking with a loan processor. Is everything on track to close this loan? It's a yes or no, but you may not get the full picture. They might be motivated to just say yes to placate you, even though they know there's some, possible hurdles. What would be an open-ended question that would get you more information? How are things progressing toward closing this loan? Yeah, how are things progressing? That shows that you want more than just a yes or no answer. Ken, can you describe where we are in the closing process? Yep. Can you describe what items are still outstanding, if any? Yeah, that's asking for everything outstanding. How are things looking to close this loan? Ooh, I like that. How are things looking? That's one of those little short ones you can have on your sticky note to remember to ask that open-ended question. Can you explain the outstanding items that need completed to close this loan? Where are we at? Yeah, where are we at? Todd and Lakeisha, Jinx, you both got that one at the same time. Where are we at? Tell me more about the progress. Walk me through. Ooh, I like the walk me through. I feel like we need a list of all of those open-ended starter phrases. Walk me through, tell me about, where are we at? These are great ones. Okay, I feel like you guys got a handle on it. What questions do you have? What are your thoughts on what we've learned so far? How might you use this information? Hopefully you've had a couple aha moments. With number one, it's challenging. Open-ended questions are not as easy as they sound. Let's see. Ken says, making internal relationships less transactional. I love how you phrased that. Exactly it. Building relationships that are based on trust and respect and being other oriented rather than just give me what I need right in this moment. Transactional. Great way to describe it. Anyone else? One thing you'll do differently now that you have some of these tips and tricks for open-ended questioning? From a trainer perspective, we have to be careful and not say, are there any questions? That's a yes or no question, right? So I try not to do that, but I still do it sometimes. A better thing would be put your questions in the chat. I'm assuming that you have questions and questions are great. Go ahead and put them in the chat. Or What's one thing that you'll take away from this training, or how might you use this information? You become a better trainer, even if you're using more open-ended questions. Lakeisha says, sound less demanding, but making the conversation more open. Yeah. When you're doing peppering someone with closed-ended questions, you do sound more demanding. Ebony says, allowing my team to take ownership. Yeah, that's a huge corner to turn in your leadership journey. Steve shares, encouraging dialogue from the person you're talking to is not only beneficial for yourself, but also helps the other person develop their thought and communication process. It's in the conversation that we can uncover unique qualities for loan origination and team member training. Fabulous. Great takeaway. Wow, if we did all of that in 45 minutes, I call that a successful lunchtime learning opportunity. So thank you for that. Yeah, thank you for whoever hearted that too. Great takeaway. So in our last few minutes that we have together, I'm going to just share some other techniques for you. There's a couple frameworks. They're easy to learn, and they're helpful to remember when you're just starting to flex your muscles in this area. The first one is called the 5 W's and H approach. The 5 W's and H refer to who, what, where, when, why, and how. These types of questions help you clarify needs and pain points, uncover any hidden goals or requirements, make any technical conversations more user-friendly. It helps you be more human-focused, more other-oriented, helps you identify and overcome objections or pain points. And again, you're going to achieve alignment. So all those great goals that we talked about, why open-ended questions matter, use these starters to dig deeper and not interrogate. So who? You can always ask a who question. An example, who should be included in communication? Who's impacted? Who's involved? You can always ask additional who questions, especially in origination. Tell me about who might be involved. Who might I be communicating with throughout this process? Who questions are great. What? You can identify steps and set expectations. What are your steps? What are your plans? What are your goals? What are the anticipated challenges and solutions is a good example. What questions definitely help open it up. But be careful. What is the deadline is a closed-ended question. So you can ask what questions, but you have to make sure they're open-ended for them to work. Where can help you pinpoint trouble spots. Where do borrowers typically get stuck in the current process? Where are your concerns? Where do you anticipate this process might be challenging for you? When? Agree on a timeline. When are all the deadlines and consequences if we don't meet them? When are your when are your goals set to be achieved? That sort of thing. Why? Explore motivations and priorities. Why is this important to you? Why is this closing date so crucial for you? I heard a story, and I share this often, when you ask someone, what is your preferred closing date? When can we close? The sooner the better. Or, what are your goals? If you just ask closed-ended questions, you won't get the full story. But if you say, why is this closing date important to you? You might get, and here's a story I heard a processor share, is that, hey, I really want to close before Christmas because I'm the first person in my family to own a home. And I've been telling everyone that once I get in this home, I'm going to host Christmas, and it will be the first time the entire family can be together under one roof in a home around the Christmas tree. Like, how amazing to hear that story from someone and to understand their motivations and the why behind their priorities. That open-ended question would definitely help build a relationship. And then how, you can document key processes by asking, how do you intend to do this? So the 5 W's and H is really just to encourage you to ask more questions, but you still have to flex that skill of making them open-ended. The other technique is the TED approach. And I think you guys started really doing this well in your examples that you were giving. TED stands for tell me, explain to me, describe to me. So TED questions help the other person to speak more than you. In any given situation, you will walk away with a stronger relationship if you speak less than the other person. So you're constantly trying to find ways to get the other person to talk more than you are. So avoid those yes, no, or one word answers. You're going to increase trust, gain clarity, bigger picture, greater and deeper understanding of the other person. Helps you build rapport while you're gathering information. Now, you still have to get the information, guys. We still have to do our jobs. We still have to get the facts. We still have to understand when, are they going to meet the deadline and how much time do they need? I'm not saying you gloss over that. You still get your information. You still have to, if they don't answer all your questions, you may still have to add in a few closed-ended questions at the end. But if you start with those open-ended questions, you're going to have that broader, deeper understanding. You can also customize your support to the other person's specific needs because they shared them with you. Ask one TED question at a time and let the other person talk. Stay quiet, let the other person go on. Then you can even ask anything else? Tell me more. You can ask that follow-up question, but follow up because you're curious. You need additional information. And use TED questions in emails and meetings to make them more collaborative as well. So when to use TED questions, I'm going to get all of these up on the screen. Goal seeking, overcoming objections, borrower experience, feedback, clarifying any assumptions. These are just some examples. Dealing with change or bad news. But tell me your goals for this home. Explain what concerns you the most. Describe to me your ideal home buying experience. Tell me what your top priorities are for this month. Describe the challenges you're facing. These are all fabulous open-ended questions that you can customize for your context or situation. But you guys covered a lot of those and more in the examples in the chat. So this is our TED approach. So in our last few minutes or so, we're not, again, since we have a smaller group, instead of breakout rooms, what I want you to put in the chat is one scenario, describe it, and what open-ended question you will use. So if you plan to practice open-ended questions in the coming week, what is your scenario and what question are you going to use? And I want everyone to think of at least one to share because I think you'll all learn from each other in this situation. While you're all thinking and typing, I'll just recap that. In the coming week or month, let's say, an area where you're going to use more open-ended questions. I want to know what the scenario is and what open-ended question you're going to ask. I want you to envision applying what you learned today, where you're going to apply it. Kim, I will be working in your area next Wednesday. Is there a good time that you are available to meet that day? So it's actually, is there a good time? Is a closed-ended question. So how I would rephrase that one, Kim, is, you're on the phone. I'll be working in your area next Wednesday. Do you have some ideas on how we can connect? Versus saying, is there a good time? Because now you're specifying a time. But if you say, do you have some ideas of how we can connect? They might say, I'm actually not going to be in the office that day, but we could get on a phone call. Would that work? You open it up for them to have more ideas versus like, no, sorry, there's not a good time that day. Or I'm not going to be in the office. And so they just say no. Steve Cooley says, loan officer one-on-one. Tell me about a couple of challenges you've had this week and what you're doing to overcome them. I love that. That's great. Sydney shares, during a pod call with our team, we express our wins, challenges, ideas. Rather than asking if someone would like to tell us if they have any wins to share for the week and getting the response of yes or no, I would rephrase to say, please share a win you have from this week. Excellent. That reminds me of kind of in a training scenario, say, instead of saying, does anyone have any questions? And everyone's like, say no, because we want to get off the call. Just say, share at least one win, assuming they have a win, and kind of you're assuming that close in that discussion. I like it. Jen Baker, for status updates in teammate meetings, walk me through the deliverables for this project. Excellent. And that way you can see, do they have a strong idea of what the deliverables are, or are you going to need to step in and maybe fill in some gaps for them? Let them describe the deliverables. I love that. Ken says, client project kickoff or exploratory discussions. What can we do to create more value, efficiency for you in this project? Wow. I would love for my IT professionals to ask that question and then just hand the baton over to their business partners to share, because you're going to get a much broader answer. Great questions. Anyone else? Here's another one from Shawnee's scenario in my one-on-one with my direct, who's in the chat when trying to gauge his workload. The question, how manageable does your workload feel right now? I love that. What I would even add is maybe the word describe to open it up even more. Describe how manageable your workload is right now. Yeah, excellent. So my wrap up here is, if you just gained maybe 3 or 4 ways to ask more open-ended questions, that's great. All we can do each day is be a little better than we were yesterday, build stronger relationships than we had yesterday, and just walk away with a little bit stronger skill set than we had before. So we do have just a minute left. So if there's any key takeaways or questions, feel free. But that is all I had prepared for you all. Thank you for being here and investing in yourself. And thank you to TMBA for allowing us this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. We appreciate you sharing your time and knowledge. Thank you to all of you for joining us and spending some time with us today. Texas MBA is continuing to work on bringing you great content like this webinar. So please be sure to check out texasmba.org to check for future webinars and keep an eye out for the emails so you can register. One last note, don't forget, coming up on November 16th, we're going to be back at the LBJ Library. So please make sure you try to attend 2026 Texas MBA Housing Summit. The registration is now open, so we hope to see you there. Thank you again, everyone, and we appreciate your time. Have a great day. Any other thoughts, feel free to put them in the chat.
Thank you, Jen.
Have a great day, everyone.
You're very welcome. Have a great rest of your week, everyone.